if I'm going to fault it, I guess I'd say that it develops itself too slowly. And I'm not the sort of plebeian who can't go without wall-to-wall action sequences for the duration of 2 episodes, but I just think that if you've got a series whose premise involves setting up episodic arcs, where you introduce characters with these sort of cool and exotic superpowers, it seems logical that you're going to want to set the climax of these arcs with confrontations between the 2 characters. And while there are action scenes, a lot of the time they seem to be sort of perfunctory and don't really get conclusively resolved, which is sort of a disappointment when it seems that's what the series seems to be leaning towards of its own accord. Another thing that I couldn't get my head around really in this series, this may seem really petty, but the character designs just couldn't appeal to me. I'm not even entirely sure why. It's just something about the excessively angular or bold artistry that Bones employs. Normally I love Studio Bones, as you probably well know by now, but it's just that the characters in this series just don't really look right for me. But overall, Darker Than Black is a very competently executed series. It is compelling, it is entertaining to see play out. And in spite of these small flaws, it basically does do everything with the premise that you'd expect it to. The conclusion, and I use the word advisedly because of course there's a 2nd season that just finished its run in Japan on December 24th. Which hasn't come out here yet, and obviously the 1st season has to leave some things open in order for it to be continued. But the conclusion of the series does seem to be sort of sudden, quite jarring, and does leave a lot of things sort of unsatisfactorily resolved or unresolved. And it does feel like a bit of a letdown, a bit of a cock tease, to be honest, when the series comes to its conclusion. But otherwise, the series is very competently written, very well executed, just generally all around. It took a premise and it made something good out of it. Just as a side note, while the tone is generally very serious, there are definitely comedic moments, particularly facilitated by the character of a sort of bumbling detective known as Kurosawa, who's got a tendency to get in over his head with contractors, and his assistant, who's an otaku known as Kiko. And, well, this is the sort of start of the Darker Than Black's very quite self-referential streak. It's very aware of its own audience as sort of anime nerds like you and I, and it does have, while this sort of humour usually doesn't appeal to me, the sort of humour that you often get in anime I often find to be quite intrusive and quite obstructive, you know, the sort of low slapstick and the miscommunications. It does sort of get in the way of what's otherwise a serious plot. And it would bother me in Darker Than Black if it wasn't as funny as it is, because a lot of the sort of comedic set pieces that Kurosawa and Kiko inject into the series do make for welcome relief, and they are genuinely quite funny. So, and there's actually, in the DVD release, there's a addendum to the series. While the series actually ends with the 25th episode, there's a 26th episode in the DVD release where you get to see sort of a comical misadventure just sort of inserted into the sort of middle of the series, and it's just so fantastically well written that you can forgive the sort of face faulting and sort of lowbrow humour, because it really comes together really very well, and it's a mark of how professional the production is that they managed to sort of take a device in anime that I usually hate and turn it into something so appealing. I guess, at the end of the day, Darker Than Black's biggest flaw, really, is that it's ultimately what you expect it to be and not really anything beyond that. Given that I expected big things from it, the sort of high-quality action scenes and the intrigue and, you know, a character who's been nicknamed among fans, apparently, as Chinese Electric Batman, I'm not complaining for being what I expected it to be. But there are it is sort of formulaic insofar as a seinen show can be formulaic. Um, that's not to say it's not entertaining or even that it's dispensable, so to speak, but I guess you could say that it's not really going to leave a lasting impression on the sort of anime world's consciousness. It's not sort of a game changer, despite the sort of staff involved, which is kind of a disappointment when you consider the caliber of the staff at Studio Bones and having Yoko Kanno on board. It does seem like it should be a blockbuster. It's ultimately just sort of another series, I guess you might say, albeit a very well written, very competently executed one. And for that reason, Darker Than Black, as it stands now, gets 3 stars on the 4-star scale from me. What the second season, Ryusei no Gemini, does to sort of change it, I'm not sure. I guess I'll find out when it gets DVD release here. But as it stands now, it's definitely a very enjoyable series and one worth checking out. Although you should realise that it's not going to be sort of the sort of life-changing experience that you might expect from other high-quality productions in the sort of Darker Than Black range. So yeah, that's me for now. Tune in next time, I guess, for the third and final part of the post-Christmas review special, where I'll be talking about what I probably consider to be the best series I've seen so far this year. Until then, that should be soon. This is The Thrasher, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.